You're listening to the Adventuring Pod for the 3rd week of October 2023. This week, the party decide to ask the big question: what if? The Adventuring Pod is discussing tabletop and gaming the Irish way.
Time, space, reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility, where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds than the ones you know. I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question: what if? Good day, everybody. I'm Owen.
I'm Shane.
I'm Alternative Reality Savage Mick. Yes.
Got iPad somehow.
And welcome to the party. We're here to discuss our second installment of What If? A series of hypothetical, historical events that might have occurred and changed gaming forever.
What if we'd never done the Battle Royale for RPGs a couple of years ago?
We would have needed to find another 15 episodes of content from somewhere. What a boondoggle that one was. Yeah, I had fun regardless. So my pick today is one near and dear to my heart. It's to do with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And it is, what if Malal had kept around? Now, join me through the curtain here where I explain to you a little bit about the history of the development of the lore of Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000. And one of them was, if you go back to Warhammer Fantasy Battle First Edition, and you leaf through the section to the place where the Chaos Gods are listed, you will see 3 Chaos Gods listed there. And you will see Khorne, you will see Nurgle, and you will see Malal. And some people are going, what? But the 3rd Chaos God in the Warhammer Fantasy book was Malal. Now, Malal's bag is he is the force of chaos that turns against itself. And Malal, as a result, is the chaos god that fights the other chaos gods. And I've always loved him as a concept, and he basically didn't make it out of that book. He was originally invented for a comic book strip, The Legend of Caleb Dark, I believe. And he was invented by an artist and a writer for GW. But the difficulty was GW did not own the copyright. And that means that they were not able to use Malal.
Right.
And as a result, they kind of jettisoned him from the canon pretty early. He was originally going to be his own Chaos God. He was going to get his own in the very well-regarded Lost in the Dam books, and some material was written for him. But otherwise, he got fired off, and Malal left the canon and is only kind of around now as a couple of minor Chaos Gods in Warhammer Fantasy under the names of Zuvasan and Nakoho, and an entity called Malice that occasionally pops up in Warhammer 40,000. So that's Malal, and Malal is one of my favorite what if. If he'd hung around, what does Warhammer look like? Now, in reality, it wouldn't look massively different. But having a 5th Chaos God around would have done some interesting things to it. Because one of the weirdness of the Chaos Gods is that they have a symbol, which is an 8-pointed star. There's 4 Chaos Gods. Why are there 8 points? And you can make a lot of, well, maybe it's because of this. But more recently, they're revisiting this. And they released a picture of the 8-pointed Chaos Star, and they labeled each point. And you'll go around, you'll see Heedless Solar, which is Khorne, Infernal Tempest, which is Tzeentch, Putrid Corruption, which is Nurgle, and Rapturous Sensation, which is Slaanesh. In addition to that, you have Malevolent Artifice, Encroaching Ruin, Formless Distortion, and Ravenous Dissolution. Ravenous Dissolution is self-destruction. If you're looking for Malal's portfolio, there it is. Malevolent Artifice is currently a minor chaos power called Vashtor. is trying to ascend in the current storyline in 40k.
Oh,
That's the
right,
portfolio he's going for.
yeah.
Encroaching Ruin is hinted at being the portfolio of a chaos god in waiting called the Dark King, which, if you're following along with the late tail end of the Horus Heresy series, you'll read more about that.
The recently released book.
Yes,
Yes, I've heard rumors. I've been a while since I read a Horus Heresy book, but yes, okay.
the Dark King is a in potentia thing, and then you have Formless Distortion, which is currently no one's vying for that one. So, what do I think would happen if Malal was? Well, you'd have a hardcore of anti-chaos players, who paint their guys black and white and love fighting other chaos guys, which is actually an important stop on chaos kind of tribal players, because they can be some of the most annoying people in any fandom. The guys who support the bad guys, because they want it both ways. They demand the aggression and storyline focus and initial wins that the bad guys have to get to be established as a threat. And then, as soon as we move to the stage where something might be decided and a winner might be selected from the different factions, all of a sudden, no, I'm sorry, we have to be considered an equal faction to everybody else and have an equal chance of winning after dominating the early stages of it. I saw it with Chaos players, I saw it with Shadowlands, I relish the opportunity of any infighting in that group. And that's what I love.
And with Malal, it comes built in, right?
Absolutely built in. The force of chaos turning against itself. And my big wish was that Malal in first edition 40k or first edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle, there had been a Chaos Warrior career. And the Chaos Warrior career would have been intended for a Chaos Warrior of Malal. And if that had happened, we would have had 30 years of stories from GMs about that damn Chaos Warrior of Malal they had in the party, who went ham in the middle of their conspiracy episode, or mutated spontaneously and started throwing tentacles out all over the place. And I'm so sorry we never got that, because there's so much fun to be had in terrible gaming stories about paladins. Be nothing compared to terrible gaming stories about the Chaos Warrior of Malal in my party. And that's what I miss about it. So I wish Malal was around. I wish he was around. And he might come back, but it's very difficult to get Games Workshop to, pay people for what they're worth. So
Yeah. I think that is, for me, the core of this what if is, in order for that universe to happen, we have to get a Games Workshop that maintains a lot more of that early gaming hobby, doing it for a lark energy, where they're just sort of throwing things together, and it's John Blanche is the inspiration, and a dozen different writers, each with their own mad ideas, just throwing stuff at the wall.
do you want to hear the maddest Malal theory?
Oh,
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely the maddest. Absolutely the maddest. The maddest Malal theory is that Malal was in 40k, and the other Chaos Gods ganged up on him and hurled him out of the Immaterium into the material realm, and they cast him out into deep space.
To about 6000 BC.
No,
Okay, it's not the Emperor then.
well, millions of years ago, where he shaped and created a new set of life forms to serve him and set them out to find where all the signs of life were and destroy it and destroy chaos that way. And Malal then is the guiding intelligence behind the Tyranids.
pretty mad, but also pretty cool.
Oh, I kind of like that.
It's really good.
That's pretty good.
It's mad as hell, but it's really
And if they'd kept the, was it the Zorns? Who are the diplomat guys? Zoanthropes.
so it's yeah. But like if you look at the original artwork for Malal's servants, they were all these weird insect people hybrids.
All right.
And there was a lot of, if you look at the original Malal, they've got big praying mantis claws and stuff.
Well, doesn't take a.
That's a bit of an altered mainstay.
That's a pretty short bit of red string on the Psycho map there.
Yeah,
That's not a hard connection to make. Yeah. So that picture, you posted the 8-pointed star picture that you were discussing.
yeah.
And we'll see if we'll editor, if you're there, see if we can throw that into the show notes at some point. It's It's not the sort of thing you just put together for no reason.
No, I think that's where they're going. They're going for 8 Chaos Gods.
Oh, what was the one you mentioned that was going for? Was it Malevolent Artifice?
Vashdor. Vashdor is
Ashtor,
currently
yeah.
going for Malevolent Artifice.
Seen his model. He looks a little half finished, so presumably he's still self-actualizing.
Just wait for 12th edition and he'll probably get a new model.
In fairness, now the story clips along at a fair pace these days.
Yeah, probably be in 3 weeks when they announce 12th edition at this point.
They're still only on 10th, sir.
I know, but they're going through them a bit.
Well, given the clip at which they're bringing back Primarchs in the main continuity now, then yes, having those alpha level threats on the Chaos, and now Chaos God versus Primarch, big split. But if you instead are looking for kind of Chaos champions on the level of Mortarion, who is a Chaos Prince, isn't he? Obviously, Angeron is.
They're all the Chaos Primarchs, with the exception of maybe
Lorgar?
No, Lorgar is probably in Chaos Undivided. Pertabo, there's a bit of a question mark over. Pretty sure he's a Demon Prince. Alfarian and Omegon, who are both definitely dead. Well, definitely dead.
Yeah,
aren't,
sure.
and neither is
Night Hunter.
the Night Hunter, because he wasn't into that stuff at all. He is not a Chaos Prince, he's just dead.
Too edgy for Chaos. Okay, so Malal, an excellent. Yes, there's always been rumblings. I imagine what's next? Was Ian Watson right? Like, did he write the definitive history of the Imperium, the Inquisitor trilogy, the Inquisitor War trilogy? Was it? That if you like it, Malal and the Ian Watson books are pushed back and to the side of the main continuity quite a ways. So if they're willing to toy with bringing Malal back, then who knows what's possible. Yeah, I suppose the what if he'd stuck around. Chaos champion, Chaos Warrior idea sounds like a whole lot of fun. And it makes perfect sense. That kind of will they, won't they, hero / anti-hero that you can bring into a campaign, or you can, if you have a player who's kind of really gunning for it, you can do that with them. It would have been an interesting sort of grey place to inhabit in the old world, and in maybe it doesn't work in 40k, but the old world. So
there's tons of Renegade Chaos Space Marine chapters, which would be great if you could go. Yeah, they don't serve Chaos directly. They serve Malal, so they fight a lot of Chaos, and there's tons of space for that. Tons and tons of space for that.
we're on Blackheart and his Corsairs. Yeah. Okay. Where are we? How long did that take us? Just checking. This is the nuts and bolts of making podcasts, folks. Sometimes we got to kind of look and see how long we're taking to get it done. Okay, so moving on to Scar. What have you got for us? What if?
What's if with you? So I looked at the list. We have a very generous list given to us by our, not patrons, but like our supporters on Discord, and we appreciate it very much. They gave us a long list. We might have to take a while to chip away at.
I'm making the heart sign with my fingers, folks. Just okay. Big love.
But there was one here that stood out to me and my biases, because we all have biases, and that is from one Uber Alex, who asked us, "What if West End Games had made a Star Trek RPG instead of a Star Wars RPG?" So, for context, folks, the 80s, when RPGs started getting big, of course, the great ominous corrupted cancer-ridden whale that is licensing obviously came into it relatively early on, and big sci-fi franchises like Star Trek and Star Wars were no exception. Star Trek got into a very weird spot with early licensing, because basically the licensors got this weird package of all of the original series is stuff, all of like the various aliens, the Romulans, the Klingons, the Gorn, all and the Federation, all their spaceships, but not any of the character stuff. And that was put into a package called Starfleet, and that was the big Star Trek licensing thing for many years, until I think like the late 90s, when Last Unicorn Games finally got proper licensing on Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. So that was sort of the how Star Trek was being licensed back then. But another group called West End Games, they managed to score the Star Wars license at a time when Star Wars was very fallow. This was when Lucas was teaming up with Spielberg to make the Indiana Jones franchise, and basically had forgotten what Star Wars was for a good solid 10 years. And so West End Games got the Star Wars licenses, and they just started pumping out material, and it was very well received because their early D6 based system was simple enough for people to accept, and generally was considered successful for the 80s. Yeah, you can still get. I think they made an anniversary edition of it, like just before the pandemic. So you can probably still get a copy if you're looking for it. But they made this D6 Star Wars, and they started pumping out huge amounts of material. Obviously, a whole bunch of stuff based on the original movies. But then, obviously, creative types in the 80s, they decided to start making their own material. And this was before, at this point, Star Wars was already a licensing juggernaut. But this is the Kenner action figures era of Star Wars licensing, where it's just like, yes, you can make up Bilbo, the missile launching Ewok, and you can come up with the Wookiee playset with free trebuchet to launch Chewbacca's misshapen cousins into nets and stuff. It was the Wild West of Star Wars licensing, and Western Games were basically given carte blanche to just start chunking out Star Wars material to suit the games that they were running. And so they start picking out all kinds of stuff, fleshing out systems, making extra alien races, figuring out how the Imperial Starfleet work, making up, how big's a Star Destroyer, how big is a Death Star, all these factoids that they needed for their game because it was the 80s, and nerds needed technical details and all of their stuff. And this was all generally in service of one of the most successful games of the 80s. But it also lit a fire under Lucasfilm's cash reserves, and they realized, wait, people are buying the stuff. People want new made up stuff for Star Wars, and this got people thinking. And they started hiring the writers for West End Games to write novels for Star Wars. Something that hadn't happened since the botch job of a failed sequel script that became Splinter of the Mind's Eye. And I think there's some Lando Calrissian spin-off novels, and I think a Han Solo series or something. But those were like dime novels that would have come out just for
Brutal.
they're actually not bad. At least they're short. Is what I'm saying. It's like they weren't. What I'm trying to get to is that the West End Games getting this license and producing material kicked off the 90s Star Wars expanded universe. Because if you look at the people who wrote those West End Games supplements, and the people who wrote the first batch of expanded universe novels, you'll see an awful lot of similar names. Timothy Zahn, Aaron Crispin, I believe. Mark Stackpole, famous for all his Battletech time stuff as well. These guys cut their teeth. Max Stackpole was a contributor to one of those Kickstarters you were talking about in a previous episode, the Grimtooth Traps Kickstarter. He put in. He was a Tunnels and Trolls player, and he submitted many a deadly trap to the Grimtooth compilations. So. So that this is what I'm saying is the fact that West End Games got the Star Wars license kicked off a massive push for previously RPG writers to get into the novel writing business, and started a renaissance in Star Wars that some might claim actually got the impetus going bit by bit over the 90s in order to get us to the prequel trilogy. I don't know if that holds water necessarily, but there's certainly people who will claim that you put the pile of dominoes and starts with, West End Games get the license to, Jar Jar Binks. People make that assumption all the So we go back to the original question. What if that gets flipped? What if West End Games instead gets the Trek license during the 80s where... When was Rathacon? Rathacon was 76 or so?
No, I think the original one, motion picture, was 76. Wrath of Khan, I think, was early 80s. Hold on. 82, yeah.
Wow, yeah, I got my things up. So yeah, we're talking about getting the Star Trek license. And I'm not Starfleet, the proper Star Trek license.
Does Starfleet Battle still get its in perpetuity license for certain elements of the original series and the cartoon show?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I keep forgetting the cartoon show is also included in this. So,
Yeah.
like all the cat people in are Star Trek.
You'll put some respect on Maressa's name, sir. You'll put some respect on Maressa's name.
Forgetting that like all of Larry Niven's stuff is also canon because of he did an episode of that series.
Do you remember what the tripartite, the 3-limb, 3-arm alien in the anime series is called?
Do not remember now.
I'm trying to recall myself, but I know Maress was basically the cat girl, because Peter David featured her in Star Trek Frontiers, his book series spin-off.
Yeah, he took a few elements and put it in that.
Maress was voiced by Majel Barrett in the series.
Well, they had to give her work somehow.
She needed, the mistress needs work. The mistress needs work.
I'm pretty sure she's dead. She still gets checks for playing the voice of the computer.
It's the way things are meant to be, man. The way things are meant to be. So if you do this, right, the main thing that happens is you're going to get a bunch of additional detail added to the series prior, but it'll only be just prior to next gen launching. And because writers will often go and see if the source material, it means that you're going to see alterations to the next generation and later DS9, depending on what they did. Because one of the things RPG writers have to do is they have to fill in some of the setting, because you get asked questions and you have to be able to answer those questions like, what do people eat, or how do people make money? And they might have decided to have money in Star Trek, or they might not have. They weren't as stiff about wages in the original series era as they later were in TNG, where they have no money. We don't do
Perfectly fully automated space communism, etc., etc.
So, for example, Gold Press Latinum mightn't exist because they might have come up with a different currency that's universally applied. So you could have some interesting knock-ons as a result of that in terms of kind of additional canon developments. Like, for example, they might have done more stuff with the Klingons and Romulans as antagonists, or they might have developed their own antagonistic races.
Potentially, yeah.
And so, so those races could turn up. And how much space they have? Because if you remember, in the early Next Generation, they tried to make up new alien races.
Yeah, the Ferengi.
And it was a very mixed bag. Like the Ferengi, for example, are like 1 or 2 episodes of a serious, dangerous threat, and then just become comic relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, they never really... You got to get to the Dominion and stuff. Oh, the Borg,
the Borg is when you get your first real...
Huh.
Yeah, and they don't really show up to until episode 2, but then they have the retcon that the end of season 1 was actually done by the Borg. And then, of course, there's that infamous conspiracy episode where there was
the alien parasites.
Yeah, the alien parasites that never appeared again, despite, they sent a message.
When and Picard phases a guy in his head. A scene that is cut on Irish TV that many of us have only seen later as well. That did not happen on Irish TV. And we also weren't told that Irish unification was 2024. We didn't hear that one either. We didn't hear that one either. No, it's still in the future. It can still happen, strangely.
Well, who knows? Life is strange. You made a point about how this would have only just happened before TNG, the Next Generation, landed. I think that's actually... that matters. That matters quite a bit. One of the things that West End Games had was a lot of time. Not time necessarily to write the project, but time for it to percolate out into the wider Star Wars fandom. And those were people who eventually, some of them would kind of trickle into the creative duties on things like the prequel trilogy and later movies. So if you didn't have that kind of time for it to percolate out, you'd find the diest of diehard Trekkies, or the places where Trekkies and role-playing people intersect, would have been fully on top of this stuff, and possibly gone into TNG expecting to see some of these things. And if they weren't there, or if they were sort of half cut or half realized, they might have had a slightly negative reaction, or they might have sort of been in a sense that, oh, they're kind of doing Star Trek a bit wrong. So there's a possibility that it could have. I'm not sure there's ever been any real split in Trek fans. If they'll watch Discovery and Picard, they'll watch anything. But sorry, I couldn't resist. But it's. I wonder, would it have, like, TNG was a very unifying, uniting place for Star Trek fans, because the show was back. It was doing fresh, new, interesting things, and it only had one timeline, one creative team doing anything with it. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
You see, the big X factor is there. If you are West End Games and you're developing Star Trek content and it's just about to go into active production, your approvals process is going to be very different, because you're probably going to have everything actively put past Gene Roddenberry at the time because of when it's coming out. Whereas it might have been, quieter earlier, let's say. It's a bit like if you're Total War studio and you're doing Total Warhammer, you can probably get much of what you want past GW at the moment because they're not actively using the setting anymore. Licensees are using it, but they weren't until recently using the setting at all. And they're going to be using it for the old world, but that's it. And that's set like hundreds of years back, so that basically Creative Labs can do what they want. Because I don't think you would have seen Cathay come out of Games Workshop looking the way it did. I think it came out looking the way it did because they said, right, this is what we're doing. And Games Workshop said, you're paying us a bunch of money for this, so go ahead, work away. Do whatever you like, And similarly for Kisev. Kisev looks quite different with the way they did it to its portrayals in the war game and the RPG. So yeah, that's them being able to fiddle with stuff, and it's not an active development. Whereas if it was kind of being actively developed, I would imagine you would probably see more difficult approvals process and a lot more feedback being given to West End Games in terms of, Gene, don't like this, don't put that in.
Or even, we can't get that on the screen. Jim Henson's busy, so can we get something with more of a kind of ridged forehead and maybe two arms?
Can we get a little knobbly bit on the nose? I like the green skin and the prehensile tentacles. However, counterpoint, little knobbly bit on the nose. Flesh tones, just the same, huh? Oh yeah.
That is the thing, because as I say, it was a very different environment between Trek and thing. As I said, basically Star Wars was just licensing at that point, and there wasn't really the strong hand at the tiller like there was a later when they realized that, we can make money, and also Lucas might want to make more movies. Whereas the 80s are in many ways big momentum building decade for Star Trek, where they were still making movies and the movies were generally doing relatively well. And TNG was coming out basically at the same time the West End Games would have been releasing this hypothetical RPG. So yeah, you can see it very easily see in a situation where the license goes out, but they have to delay the release until late 1987 just so that it syncs up with TNG. And maybe you have writers who want to go, I want to go back in the original series and do Gorns and Hortas and whatever, and make supplements for them. But Paramount is like, oh no, you need to put Ferengi and this weird jellyfish space station into your supplement.
The OS Trek movement gets going, and it all happens anyways, because you can't keep a good Kirk down.
Yeah, true.
I think possibly the most interesting part about this is that with an active TV show that's wildly popular and an actively developed RPG system alongside it, it may have dragged. Like, what do you need to make an RPG system popular to the masses? Matt Mercer, apparently. But a well-received media project where people can follow along the story and get to know the characters and sort of see some of the world. And like that's a weekly TV show of the game you're currently releasing supplements for. You couldn't ask for a better advertisement for your product, and then you become a real ambassador for. When people think about RPGs, they don't think about some TSR nonsense. They think about Trek. Think about the Star Trek role-playing game.
At the same time, I don't think we would have seen the same pipeline between the RPG space and the licensed novel business that we saw with the Star Wars thing. I feel like Paramount would have been very much more protective about who gets to write the real stuff, and I'd imagine that it's more likely that, as you said, suggestions would flow the other way, as every so often the RPG writers would find a TV writer coming in to like edit their work before publishing.
Yeah, but I'm thinking more about how the public react to it, and just being able to, instead of going, instead of having to have a conversation. This is what, the mid-90s, where you're like, oh, what's a role playing game? Oh, well, it's like TNG was the okay. You're talking about when? Okay, I've what ifed all my way down the timeline. But you're trying to explain to your parents what the hell a role playing game is, and you're talking about demons and dragons and barbarians, and or you can just point to the television and go, Barry pretends to be Captain Picard, I pretend to be Worf. We solve space dilemmas together. I think it's a easier thing to talk about. It's got a big monolithic thing in the culture to back you up, so you don't look so goddamn weird. I think one of the knock-ons I think would probably have been to, I mean, 10 years down the line from when the original role-playing game releases, when you're doing the TNG supplements, is to vastly elevate the public consciousness around role-playing games in a way that we've had to wait until things like Critical Role to do now. Yeah, I think that's the big blue sky kind of what if thought I have on that. I think there would have been, and it would have meant that space-based role-playing games were probably going to be more popular than dungeon-based role-playing games. So you write the Traveler and all sorts of other things, just Traveler really. Ride the coattails and start. The Star Wars people aren't going to sit around forever and watch Star Trek take all the RPG money. They'd get one out there eventually. Who would they contract to do it? Maybe Chaosium? Or
Could be TSR. Actually, the one of the knock-on thing is that you don't have a lot of the external extra canon developed for a lot of the different bits and pieces in Star Wars as a result of this. So, like, modern Star Wars has less things to work with if West End Games isn't doing the initial thing. Like, for example, Orinoco of the Drussellians, would be just known as Pruneface because that's what he was named on his toy. It's Pablo Hidalgo comes along later in one of the early Galaxy guides and actually names all these species get named by West End Games. They didn't have names. They were just like a cool creature effect someone came up with.
Yeah, the licensing juggernaut of later on versions of the expanded universe doesn't necessarily develop as quickly, and maybe that licensing never goes beyond like Marvel comics and the like.
I had a really funny thing earlier this year in August. An Irish Times journalist was writing a review of us and mentioned how all the guys were called like Pruneface and Squidhead when he was a kid, as a jokey aside. And he immediately was getting scorched on Twitter about these people all have names, And I posted said no, they
fandom is
didn't.
no chill.
It's in the late 80s they get names, and we
Yeah.
started posting the original toys when they were called Pruneface and Squidhead. I was like, they didn't have names for ages. It's later on they did.
Did they print those on the blister packs? Did they
Yeah,
print
hold
the
on.
squid? Wow. And that's like, what do you want for Christmas, Billy? I want a prune face.
I had Pruneface. He came in a marvelous cloth cape, which was actually quite a sought after soft good at the time. He was actually a Drussellian. He was a governor and just basically part of the thing. Some people thought he was a Bothan for a while because no one knew what the Bothans looked like because she just said, Mom Moffat just says many Bothans died to bring. There's no Bothans there going, hi. So it's
Except for me. I was I quiet quit on that one. I'm still alive. Yeah. Well, it's definitely a great what if. But I think the time has come to move on to our last what if for the evening. And it's my pick. Let me check the list, see who it was I pilfered this from. Goodness, I've lost it. Xaosseed,
The Seed of Worlds.
our data cruncher, and you'll find links to his what's he called his blog? Worlds Without Number? Seed of Worlds, excuse me. I am always thinking of Kevin Crawford. I'm always watching out for him. But I feel like I might be killed by one of his books one day. They're massive. It'll deorbit and murder me. Yes, he has. I'd better say it now instead of thinking about deorbiting giant role-playing tomes. What if the virtual support for D&D 4th Ed had happened as planned? Great question.
Yeah, this is a different one. We can just quickly go over the context of this one. Is that the original plan and the thought for fourth edition is that it was going to come with basically an early VTT. It was going to be a big D&D Beyond style character management tool or website or app or
Not just that, but an actual virtual tabletop. You play online. In fact, I have dug up a CNET article from April of 2008, which is when, yes, June 6th, 2008, 4th Ed lands. And in the hype previous, D&D personas had talked to various outlets. The CNET article comes up, which is it's kind of interesting to find it here because this is an intersection between technology and role playing, which sort of hasn't been seen since someone developed the Boggle dice roller. So you've got a lot of big claims being made in this article about what this digital initiative called Dungeons and Dragons Insider was going to be, and they promised a lot. And as anyone who, if anyone's looking around for their AOL install discs to find their bundled copy of Dungeons and Dragons Insider, will be able to tell you it didn't happen. Like it didn't even come close to happening. I think we saw some previews of a character builder, and that was about it.
Okay, so I don't want to go into details because, well, the problem is that this is a actual real world tragedy. To say that no, people died. As I said, I don't want to dwell on details.
So, like Burt Gummer, there are details about this I was not briefed on beforehand. Okay, so I'm going to let you roll this dice, and then I'll decide how to skip through this field of thorns. Off you go, Scar. What happened?
The head programmer behind this initiative basically came to a bad end, and as I said, details are not really necessary, but basically that poisoned the entire project. Not to say that it ever probably got that far off the ground. It was again.
They had preview. They appeared to have something they could show journalists, and the journalists went, "Oh, that looks very good." So it was fairly far along. Just type into chat what happened, and put a number beside. Just put a number beside whatever the cause of death was. Like how many?
Like the thing is, VGTs are not ridiculously spec wise. You know, you could at the time have produced something that people could connect to. You know, you could technically have made it, right?
They were showing off something that looks an awful lot like, in terms of quality, the character models for players' characters look an awful lot like sort of what you would have seen in Heroes of Might and Magic circa 2008. It's got that kind of, what can I say? Lighting isn't very friendly, but it's certainly there and it works. For a virtual model to put on a virtual tabletop, it would be acceptable today. So it's kind of interesting that nothing ever came of it. Now, I've just seen the chat. What can we say about that? Didn't end well for any of the parties involved. Grim, yeah. Okay, you can probably look up. Was it Chris Youngs or was it someone else? Was the head honcho? So the D&D web specialist Chris Youngs is quoted in the article that everything is sort of organized in online tools, so that players and dungeon masters will be able to find what they need. They'll be able to create characters. There's automatic process for rolling and a dungeon builder to allow dungeon masters craft environments where campaigns be carried out. And what surprised me actually was The digital game table itself starts out two-dimensional but can be rotated into being 3D. This is back in 2008. Now, that's not a long time ago. It's only a couple of financial crises since 2008.
only two once in a
Yeah, financial collapses. If you look at what was heating things up on the PC in 2008 in, say, the US, you've got Warhammer Online, Age of Reckoning. You've also got Warhammer 40,000, Dawn of War, Soulstorm, which is like third or fourth expansion to that point. Lots of Sims and Spore. That Age of Conan gets a look in as well, but that's basically it for the top 10. Lots of Sims. So the 3D isometric environment is well understood by people who are playing PC games at the time. In fact, I think this would have looked an awful lot like D&D Sims, just in terms of model quality and what that kind of plug and play Lego brick aspect of building out environments. Like, never mind diehard PC people, or never mind diehard RPG people. Regular Joes, young girls, were getting onto PCs and doing this. Sims 2 actually was huge at the time. So the necessary kind of game literacy and technical literacy for people to jump in on this was absolutely there.
Yeah.
But it never happened. It never happened due to an unfortunate personal tragedy, which is kind of wild that, okay, given everything they had in place, yes, somebody was not able to finish what they started on account of mortality. But that is not a reason to. Is that a reason to completely can a project of this scope?
I would imagine there would have to have been other issues with the process as well. I don't think this one thing was the only problem that happened. I assume that they again, it was WotC fresh off their third ed experience, trying to sort of half pivot into somewhat online content. I can very easily imagine it that they just had very organizational problems. So I think those might have been more of a factor than the technical hurdles.
video game development and stuff that is adjacent to video game development is notoriously a boondoggle, particularly for places which don't have good institutional knowledge about it. So them looking to do it in-house was probably a bit of a disaster, and contracting it out is a whole different disaster. So I would say if somebody was passionate about it, maybe leading the project, and then they're not there anymore, I think discretion may have been judged the better part of valor, unfortunately, and they would have backed off on it.
Okay, so now let's address. Imagine it happened. What was it? June 6th hits, or June 8th. D&D 4th Ed comes out, and hot on its heels, potentially by the time Christmas rolls around, they release the online character builder, NPC builder, dungeon builder, and a play space in which to play D&D. It tickles me pink. 2008, a time when we just did not trust technology. There's a lot of call outs in the CNET article, which we will link in the show notes, to how the dungeon master was still in control of the rules, and while you had the option to use virtual dice, of course you could just roll dice and input the results because I think even today people are weird about random dice rolls. The computer can't possibly be random, right? Oh, spare me.
So first off, if you thought the rhetoric of fourth ed is WoW for babies is annoying now, imagine what it would be it would have been if this was the thing, because this would have been, if it had worked, this would have been a big thing of just turning on the faucet of online play. It would have been 2008 good, but I'm pretty sure 2008 I was doing a variety of online role playing activities, IRC, various forums. In fact, this is what I think was one of the things that they shut down the WotC forums in order to help build the infrastructure that this would have. They may have saved me from online role playing in the attempt to make me role play online.
Right. I mean, MUDs and things like that were obviously a thing at this point, but we're talking about the world's probably best sold role playing game, trying to muscle into, create, because Roll20, etc., didn't exist at this point. They would have been, whereas WotC today are criticized in terms of how slowly they have come to the virtual tabletop space, and usually with some bad intentions. By the way, folks, we're intending to do a year in review episode to round out the year, and what a year it's been for Wizards of the Coast in particular. If you cast your minds back
Come
to the
listen
start
to
of the
my
year.
takedown.
So there's going to be, it's like we started with fireworks and then we just burned everything down. But the claims they might have tried to make at the start of this year, 2023, on ownership of virtual play spaces, the D&D in the virtual table space. If they'd gotten it off the ground in 2008, could there have been any argument with?
You think they would have gotten away with it if they'd actually done it?
They would have set the terms. They would have created the space. I don't think Roll20. I don't think existed
Yeah,
at
and
that
it probably
point.
wouldn't have.
And certainly, almost nothing else like it was even dreamt of at the time. And they were already. And Roll20 to date, I love it. Roll20 is fine, but it is still 2D icons on a 2D plane. And they were showing off 2008 Sims characters dressed up for Halloween in a low res Morrowind, which at the time would have been absolutely incredible, but not beyond what consumers or the technology were used to or capable of. So I think they could have completely dominated the virtual tabletop space by dint of creating it in a way that is Foundry 3D.
There's none that are actually 3D. There are ones where you can kind of mock up a 3D thing with isometrics and stuff, but it's still on basically flat plane mostly.
Yeah, I think if that would have been the first example. This is what you're comparing yourself to. Showing up with your cute little cutouts on your flat mat at that point would probably not have gotten you a lot of respect from. It certainly wouldn't have drawn off 4E players.
There were certain people who would have appreciated it because they would probably end up being a free Unity project or something, and they would people. You'd always have the cantankerous few who would say, "Oh no, the free online version is better because it's not made by the man." So, but you're always going to get that. I think by and large the market share would have leaned towards this DDI.
So perhaps the counter to that is that it doesn't look anywhere near as good as World of Warcraft.
You're taking it on when World of Warcraft is waxing. Like this is in its strongest form. The thing is, if you're prepared to commit to it and put the money in, I think they might have been able to build something really good by the end. But your problem is you're going to be asked to monetize this. And one of their problems with the fourth ed tools that they did get out there, the online tools, is that they were too good a deal. That no one needed to buy the books. They spent $10 and they just went on to D&D online and read all the mechanicals. And they lost large amounts of sales that way because it was too good a deal. And they had to get rid of it. And going, oh, well, we're producing all this content kind of for free, and now we're going to find a way to monetize it. That'll be the difficult part. Going, here's how do we make money out of this now that we've invested probably significant amounts of money into producing it. How do we then make it? And it might have failed, and then the architecture would have been picked up by somebody else and used for things. So this is the thing that could actually be, if it succeeds, it's amazing. If it fails, you could end up in a situation where there's massive amounts of debt lined up on D&D, and you need to do something with it to get rid of it.
Someone swoops in.
How good was Magic the Gathering at paying for D&D in 2008?
Like, it was grand, but I mean, the thing is, if you look back at 2000 when Hasbro acquired them, they immediately initiated cost cutting. So, I mean, the big boys are going to look at the line items, go, you're making a hell of losses here, and you've been making big losses for the last 2 years. It's time to cut bait. And they might have jettisoned some IPs. They might have tried to make some money back that way. You could have a situation where it does really well because of something, or you could have a situation where it ends up they sell D&D. And who'd buy it? Well, Paizo would, if they had the money. Wouldn't that have been ironic if Pathfinder had bought back D&D?
Yeah, it should be noted, fourth ed, marvelous covers by Wayne Reynolds, who obviously Paizo then snapped up to produce even better artwork for Pathfinder Adventures and later on the Pathfinder roleplay game. I will never miss an opportunity to give a shout out to Wayne Reynolds, produced some of the best RPG, fantasy RPG artwork in the business ever. Yeah, Fourth Ed, love it or hate it, those covers are pretty good, but they're not the best work he's done. Right, I think that is going to be where we leave things. Is there an outro for What Ifs? Does the Watcher have anything else to say?
Are there any more burning questions that people need to know? What if?
Yeah,
Please, by all means, come to our Discord and ask us. And we will attempt to, next time we dive into the time stream and attempt to sort possibility from impossibility, your question may be featured here.
But for now, regrettably, I cannot interfere. This party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike on Version 3 license.